I look at these Super Bowl rosters, and I say, I think the Niners have a really good roster, and the Chiefs are who they are. We discussed that on Monday's show. But what jumps out to me is, A, I don't think this Chiefs team is as good as last year's Chiefs team. But B, I would take the 2022 Eagles over either of those teams. Is that me being too close to the 2022 Eagles, or do you feel the same way?
Well, especially because the Niners have not been very impressive. This is not an L. I know their fans, they always talk about, how impressive their regular season is and the DVOA. Yeah. And good for them. They made the Super Bowl, so it actually doesn't matter. It's just winning the games at this point. But the style points were not there in the Packers and the Lions games. I mean, frankly, I thought they got outplayed maybe in both of those games for long stretches.
Definitely.
I think I agree with you, Zach. Here is, again, we've talked about a lot of the basketball crossover topics today. In basketball, the general rule of thumb for like a Super Bowl or obviously NBA Finals contender is you got to have a top 10 offense and a top 10 defense. In football, and you can remind me if this is wrong, that's not always the case, right? Like the dominant offense, I feel like some of the Chiefs' defenses, some of the, I think like the Packers, the Patriots, like once in a while they snuck in with pretty bad defenses. That's right?
Yeah.
That the dominant offense can kind of supersede.
I think you have to be dominant on one side of the ball. Like, I don't think you have to be top 5 on both sides or top 10 on both sides, because I've heard that in the NBA as well. But I think in the NFL, if you have one side of the ball that's absolutely elite, then the other side, it can't be horrible. But even if it's middle of the pack, you can win games because of that one side.
Well, do you think too? I mean, I would say most times it has to be the elite offense too. Is there a recent example where it's kind of mediocre offense, incredible defense?
I mean, the 2000 Ravens, the 85 Bears.
We're getting back in the here.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
The 85 Bears.
Sure. I mean, those are the ones that jump to mind. Some of those, you're probably right, because even the Patriots teams.
I'm just thinking over the last 10
in like
years.
the post Randy Moss era, those in the most recent Patriots teams, they still had Brady, right? That Patriots team that beat the Rams wasn't prolific, but they were a really good defensive team that year. They had, but they still had Brady. And no, it is true when you look at some of the great Super Bowl teams in recent years. I mean, the Ravens team that beat the Niners, when Flacco was elite,
sure.
I think that was the 2012 season. That Ravens team was better defensively than they were offensively, I would say. I'm trying to go through this in my head, but those would be the ones that really jump out. Well, actually, here I would say the Legion of Boom Seahawks were better defensively than offensively, but they still had Russell Wilson and they still had Marshawn Lynch, and it's not as if they were a dynasty either. I mean, they came close.
Claire brings up that point. The Peyton title in Denver.
Yes, good point.
He was not very good at the end
when
of
they beat Carolina. Yeah,
that was pretty much all Von Miller in that defense. Yep. Yeah. So, and I
Thanks,
remember,
Claire. Yeah, that's good dropping.
I remember in the AFC Championship game, it was like a very kind of ugly game. They beat the Patriots at the end, but the Patriots had a shot, but it was ugly, low scoring, and like Jim Nantz would always be like, "Well, the sheriff can can he get the Broncos over the finish line?" And it was just funny because Peyton Manning, for his entire career, was probably the best quarterback in the league. I mean, Brady at different times too, but right up there. And he couldn't win a title. And then when he has like one of his worst seasons at the very end, he actually wins the Super Bowl.
It's funny how that does work. But like the Eagles, for instance, were favored over the Chiefs last year.
Yeah, I mean, they were top 5 on both sides of the ball.
Yeah, and I think that this Chiefs team is inferior to last year's Chiefs team. I think, now the people in San Francisco might disagree, but I think last year's Eagles team would be favored over this year's Niners team.
I think so too.
So now Patrick Mahomes is still a buzzsaw, all right? But it is accurate to say that, or it is my opinion, at least, that the Eagles, if they could have had last year's team this year, then they would have won their second Lombardi.
I agree with you, Zach, because I think the Chiefs' offense was pretty dominant last year. And obviously I think their defense has improved, but I'm still more scared of the one elite unit. If you have to contend with that, I think that can be a pretty tough out in the playoffs. So when I look at the two teams, I would say the Niners feel more like last year's Eagles.
Yes.
Where they have the quarterback who's making nothing. They have the great group of skill players.
Good point.
They can run the ball pretty much at will. It seems like they are maximizing their quarterback's skill set. But I would say this year's Chiefs are kind of how the Eagles have to look at it moving forward. And that's really just a product of how much money the quarterback is making and roster building. You would know better than me, but it sure looks like, Andy and Brett Veach, it seems like they really killed the draft defensively for, I don't know, like a 2 or 3 year span there.
Yeah.
Like I was looking at their depth chart, and you see, I think I saw like 6 or 7 guys that were all drafted on defense from 2020 to 2022. It's like Snead, Willie Gay, McDuffie, Karlaftis.
Good point.
So it seems to me like that is how they're going to have to go about it moving forward. And, the other day I mentioned, can Vic Fangio be the Spags, the older defensive coordinator who kind of settles into a spot at the end of his career and gives the team a certain level of continuity and, gravitas on that side of the ball. It's not exactly the same, right? Like the Eagles clearly moving forward and next year especially, like they're going to spend a lot more at wide receiver than the Chiefs did. But I think that is generally the model. So, a lot of this is going to come down to Jalen.
We all silly like the mayor.